Hey everybody, Syntax77 here, taking over the Katadyn Facebook page live feed. At least I hope I am. Anybody out there? I do believe it's working. It says live, so I'm going to take that as a go, and we'll see if anybody joins. In the meantime, I got some fun notes here, and hopefully that'll keep me on point because I have a tendency to talk a little bit, but we'll try not to talk all day. And we're going to talk about winter backpacking today, specifically my experience. I just got back from a snow camping trip up in New Hampshire, and I was lucky enough to be outfitted by Katadyn with a brand new stove, which we're going to look at, the Polaris Optic system. And I went up there and tested that out, did a whole bunch of fun stuff, and then hopefully some of you will be joining us who participated in the Facebook post that Katadyn put up. Basically said, if you have any questions about winter backpacking, go ahead and ask, post them on that post, and then those people were also entered at an opportunity, if you will, to win a Katadyn bee-free water filtration system. So at the end of this video, I will be announcing that winner. A little teaser for you. I went through and I have some specific questions that I think will be good. And if anybody chimes in while we're live, maybe I'll hit up some of them as well. And I even went old school. I actually printed out all of the comments here just to keep me from fiddling with the computer while we're going here. So basically, a little bit about me, if you're not familiar with me and you're just tuning in here on the Katadyn page. I'm Syntax77, real name Sean, but my YouTube name is Syntax77, and just a little bit about how I got into backpacking as well as YouTube. They're kind of hand in hand. Every backpacking trip I've ever done, I have also documented on YouTube. I don't really know how it happened. It just kind of came to be somehow. It was back in 2011, my friend Mike, we were talking about doing a vacation together along with my wife, and so let's do a vacation as friends. And he came up with the idea to do a backpacking trip as our vacation, and I had never been backpacking before. Quite frankly, I was kind of neutral. I wasn't super excited about doing it, and I wasn't, bummed either. I knew I had to buy a bunch of gear, which I wasn't really looking forward to. I was a little daunted by that. But anyway, we ended up doing that trip up in the White Mountains. Mike doesn't mess around. He said, "Oh, your first time backpacking?" And I don't think he had been backpacking since he was like in the Boy Scouts. Anyway, we all went up there for a 5-day trip in the White Mountains. A little bit of an extreme way to kick things off. But long story short, I ended up getting hooked on it. And for whatever reason, during that trip, I filmed it. I think mostly just to preserve the memory for Mike and my wife and us. And I also filmed a couple videos preparing for the trip. Next thing I know, I got hooked on backpacking, and about 6 months later, I decided I want to go again. Nobody was available, so I said, fine, I'm going to do my second backpacking trip, which is also my first solo trip. And I went up to the White Mountains. I filmed that as well, and then next thing I know, I just started filming every trip, and here I am today, and sitting here with you. So I see we got a couple people in the room. Hey, Dwayne, what's up, man? Kevin, how you doing? Don't think I've ever heard this origin story. Yeah, that's the origin right there, pretty much, in a nutshell. Was I ever in the Scouts? No, I was not. Mike was, but I was never in the Boy Scouts. Where was I? So we got some things here to go over question-wise. Oh, so yeah, so the trip that I did, let me just get into that real quick. So I went up to the White Mountains and did a snow camping trip solo by myself, and I lucked out, I guess you could call it, or maybe it was not so lucky, depending on how you look at it. I got 12 inches of snow on the second day. It was a 3-day trip, 2 nights. So I got pounded all day for like 12 hours by pretty substantial snow. I mean, a foot in 12 hours, I guess that's an inch an hour. So that made the video pretty interesting. I'll be posting that probably within a couple of weeks. I have to finish up another video I'm doing now, but so there'll be a whole video about it. And they did send me, like I said, this cool stove, which is why we're here today, because when I was talking to them, they had previously sent me the Be Free. They asked if I would be interested in anything from their Optimist line, which is part of the Katadyn family. And I said, coincidentally, I'm getting ready to do a backpacking trip, and I kind of wish I had a stove that could do more than just canister fuel inverted. And this guy here, the Polaris Optic fuel, is pretty crazy because it can do a ton of different fuels, anywhere from gasoline to white gas, diesel, kerosene, jet fuel, and canisters. So I took this up there and played with it, and it's in the video. I go pretty in depth. I test 3 different fuels, canister fuel, of course, inverted and regular. And then I also did some white gas, which is pretty popular as a liquid fuel, right? Burns pretty clean. And then just to keep things interesting, I took a big old container of automotive diesel as well, which is not ideal, but why not test it, right? So I tested all that in the woods, and I had a great time. That'll all be on that video. And I'm looking forward to getting that out there. But let's get into some of these questions. All right, so I'm going to go to the post on Katadyn's Facebook post. And the first one I think actually is a good way to start, because it kind of brings us into the Katadyn filter that is what brought me here today. Anyway, Adam Lair said, why bring a filter in winter? Why not boil snow instead? That's true, but the reason is, and I still did bring this on that trip, the reason is because melting snow is effective and it's abundant. It's all around you, at least if you're in New Hampshire on a snow camping trip. So you don't have to worry about finding streams and stuff, but it takes forever. It's really slow. It's monotonous. I mean, I've spent hours doing it. Now, granted, you could probably go faster, but if you're in the alone in the woods by yourself and you want to use your fuel a little more optimally or efficiently, you don't want to just crank that thing. So I usually just chill out and melt snow, but I spent like 2 hours one night just sitting there melting snow. So what I did on this trip, and I've done on other trips, particularly with this Be Free, because it's so small and it has like that personal size water bag on there, you can just keep this, look how small it is. I can keep it in my pocket and I go there with it dry. But in a pinch, if I do end up near a stream or something, I'm not melting snow. I'm going to take this guy out and I'm going to just squeeze it, drink right from it, etc. That's going to save me a lot of time, and it's going to save me a lot of fuel. When I went on that trip, I ended up using up, I don't want to do too many spoiler alerts, I ended up leaning towards these guys, and I used this whole bottle of white gas, and maybe, wow, I wanted to say half of this diesel fuel, but probably more than that. You use a lot of fuel when you're melting snow. So that's the reason that I still bring a filter. Now, that brings up another question. Some people asked in the comment section about freezing with the Be Free filter, which is a hollow fiber membrane filter. I got the official word from Katadyn, and luckily it kind of meshes exactly with the way I was treating it, which is you want to avoid freezing this thing. There's no real way to tell that it's damaged if it does get messed up from freezing. So you just want to avoid that scenario. With this guy, it's pretty easy to do that. Now, when it's bone dry, when I took it in, I didn't have to worry about it so much. But let's say I hit that stream up, and on this trip, it was below 0. Just to point that out. From looking at weather data, I can't tell because my watch doesn't go down that low, so it just stopped working, the temperature. But from looking at weather data from 3 different sources, it was somewhere, anywhere from -2 to -12 is the low. Let's just call it sub-0. Anyway, let's say I used this filter. Now it's wet, so no big deal. I would just seal it up. It does a pretty good job. It's not going to leak. It has a cap on it. If you want to be super safe, put it in another plastic bag and just keep it in your pocket. I've done that before with filters on winter trips. Keep it in your pocket during the day, keep it in your sleeping bag at night, and it will never freeze. So then you're good to go, and you don't have to worry about it because, well, if it freezes, no water's getting through that thing anyway, damage or not, right? So that's the answer to that. Got some new people in here. Hey, Tyler. Does the Be Free take long to dry? Oh, and then somebody else said something about canister gas I want to get to. Does it take long to dry? Geez, I don't know. I mean, I've never really noticed. But here's the thing with the Be Free, though. See how all those, can you see that? I know my webcam isn't great. See all that surface area there? Instead of one entry point with this being like covered, it hits that from like 360 degrees through millions of little holes in there. Anyway, the point is, more surface area not only makes it faster for the water to go through, but it's going to dry quicker because it's not all sealed up. So I've never noticed this thing really staying sopping wet for too long, but I don't know. I'll have to pay attention to that sometime. Good question, man. Someone, okay, so Kevin said, I'll stick to canister gas for now. That's great. It's the most convenient fuel, I would say. But the problem with it, and I'll get into it on that video when I post it, it'll be called something like winter hammock camping in the White Mountains or something like that, coming out in a couple weeks. Anyway, at those temperatures, below zero, heck, even below 20 degrees, this stuff's going to stop working efficiently. I've harped on it a lot. If you watch my videos, you've probably heard me say it before, but this is a blend of propane and butane, basically. That's good because it makes it able to be in this light container, but long story short, the propane wants to get out of there. It's going to burn off first, and at some point it's going to conk out because the butane just doesn't want to vaporize in those types of temps below around 15, 20 degrees. So this thing's useless. White gas, on the other hand, yeah, you have to sit there and pump it and whatnot, but it's going to work to a much lower temp. So that's kind of the reason you go through the extra step of bringing this. Plus, you can pour the exact amount of fuel that you want, and you have scalability, which is kind of nice. Have I converted to B3 100%, or do you still supplement? I'm not just saying this because I'm on Katadyn's page. I'm honestly not. Otherwise, I would just have not answered that question. But in all honesty, this is my go-to, and if anybody, friends, family, or people on the internet ask me as of right now what filter to recommend, it's this one. It's got the fastest flow rate that I've seen so far. It's the lightest. Yeah, there's some other ones that, it only has them by like a hair, but this thing's 2 ounces. Yeah, it's my go-to. So in all honesty, I've experimented with tons of filters, but that is, I'm very happy with that filter. All right, thank you for posting the chats over there. Now let me actually get into some more of these Facebook posts. So from Lauren Harmison, what are the best layers to wear that are very warm but not extremely bulky? Good question. And we'll just use the trip I just came from as an example. I actually have all the clothes that I wore on that trip right here next to me. And I'll spin through them real quick. I'll try not to make it too long. But like I said, it was down to sub-zero temps on that trip. The highest I ever saw on my watch during the day was like 22 point something degrees. I don't know if I ever saw 23. So it was swinging from like 23 to like maybe -5 at night. So here's what I did. You don't have to be bulky. My very first layer was just a synthetic, and this is a very thin synthetic shirt. You'd kind of call it a thermal, like an old school thermal, but it's not cotton or anything. It's synthetic, and it's very thin. It's a real thin guy. So I would have that on first. Then over top of that, ideally, most of the time I would have a synthetic t-shirt over it as well. Ironically, when I went to Pennsylvania when it was 15 degrees the week before, I wore a t-shirt over top. For some reason, when I went to New Hampshire where it was sub-zero, I forgot to wear that t-shirt. So I didn't wear a t-shirt on that trip. I was just fine. So I had the base layer of this guy first. Then I had like this synthetic. I was just scrambling for something to wear. And not exactly backpacking gear, but just a hunting shirt, Turkey Thugs apparently. Shout out to Turkey Thugs, I guess. I just put this on. It is 100% synthetic, slightly stretchy. Everything I put on was synthetic, so if it gets wet, it's going to dry quicker, and it's going to still have some functionality versus like cotton. So I had that on next. Then next up, I had, this is what I hiked in because it was pretty cold while I was hiking, so I actually kept this on and didn't overheat. My military synthetic polar fleece. You can get these things for pretty cheap at an Army Navy store. So this has the functionality of like a down jacket, like a squishable down jacket for like 180 bucks. But like I said, this is much cheaper and it's effective. So I wore this, and then over top of that, not too bulky so far, right? I mean, this is a little bulky, but not too bad. So then my hard shell that I've had for years, just an EMS hard shell, keeps me dry. So if I take a tumble in the snow or precipitation comes, I'm good. It's also usable as a rain jacket, of course, right? But it also traps a lot of body heat, which can work for or against you. The next thing I would do is when I'm hiking, it has these pit zips, and I would keep those open. And then if I stopped and got colder, I would close them. That's it for my top while I was hiking. When I was at camp, I don't have it here, but I had a little neck gaiter. It was also a face mask. I'd roll it down. That would keep the draft from going into that hard shell we just saw. And then I had pants. I had thermal underwear. Sorry, I don't have those with me. But fleece lined hiking pants, just like the ones you would wear in summer, only they're lined with fleece. That would go over top of my thermal underwear, synthetic thermal underwear. And then on top of that, now if it wasn't so cold and I wasn't in the snow of New Hampshire, I would not have worn this till I got to camp. But this is hard shell pants. You can get whatever you want. I used to have a $15 pair of like track pants, warm-up pants, nylon, that were waterproof essentially. But I've recently upgraded to these. These are military issue hard shell pants. They don't breathe at all, but they are waterproof essentially. These trap a lot of heat, and again, they keep me from getting wet if I take a tumble in the snow, particularly your legs. And then, I don't think I have them here, but I had, oh yeah, gaiters that would seal against my boot and my pant leg to keep, if I did post hole in some snow, this would keep the snow from getting in my boots. It's a lot of items, but I promise you, it's not that bulky. My maneuverability was very good. Now, that covers all that, and boots, of course. These are pretty thin, right? Not too bulky. These are sealskins gloves. They're just synthetic, breathable, yet waterproof and permeable gloves. These are good for the snow melting when I'm doing chores. My hands stay dry, but relatively warm. When you're doing chores, you're staying warm, you're moving around. So these are good for that. They're not too thick. But other times, I would have wool gloves, and this is bulky, but worth it. A pair of over mittens to go over and protect those wool gloves. Keep them dry when I was hanging out at camp. Then that's it. Now, last thing, when I'm sitting around at camp, I would sandwich in between my base layer and my military fleece a traditional puffy down jacket, you know, the compressible guys. If it was a trip, I went to Pennsylvania, like I said, the week before, it was only 15 degrees. I didn't bring this at all, but for New Hampshire, when it's going sub-zero, I bring this and keep it in my pack, and I bust it out when I need to. And that's my whole, that's my whole clothing system right there. And then, you know, you can bring spare socks, spare long underwear, stuff like that. All right. When are you going to do the Laurel Highlands Trail in PA, says JD Riggs. I don't know. It's been recommended several times. And I know I was just in Pennsylvania, and I don't want to break it to you, but I didn't go. I didn't go to the Laurel Highland Trail. I'll keep it a surprise, but I went somewhere fun. Okay, next person is Bill Graves. What are some of the most common unnecessary items packed in camping backpacks? I want to maximize space with only needed items. Beginner or beginning camper. All right, Bill. Well, the tough part is, but the true part is, don't get too hung up on it. I mean, it's great that you're being weight conscious from the gate. So that there already tells me that you're going to do probably ahead of the curve because you're thinking about this. I didn't at all on that first trip back in 2011. That being said, the only real way to find out is you're going to be too heavy in the beginning, or at least heavier than you are years from now. Because you got to find out what works for you. Everybody has different systems, different comfort items that they bring. Right? I mean, some people might bring everything for the rest of their life, but for the most part, you're going to learn what you can ditch, and it's going to be different for everyone. So don't be afraid, don't be ashamed to have that big old pack in the beginning. You're going to have to go through this process. But that being said, and hopefully this will save you a little money, I'm trying to think of items we used to bring that are ridiculous now. We literally, you know, the term brought everything but the kitchen sink. I've said this before, but on that first backpacking trip, Mike and I did bring the kitchen sink. We literally brought a collapsible backpacking, I don't know what brand, kitchen sink, like we were going to do dishes or something and like be all fancy. So there's a great example, stuff like that. The other thing I think I would mention is, speaking of clothing is a big thing to watch out for that I blew a lot of needless weight on in the beginning. That first trip, just keep going back to that because it was my heaviest one, was 5 days, which is pretty long for a first backpacking trip. I brought, and I think I'm fairly certain we all did this. We all brought, I know I did, and my wife, an outfit, a full outfit for every single day. Like I was fancy, like I was going to go out to dinner in the club at night or something. So that's crazy. I understand you want to, be comfortable, bring spare socks and underwear and stuff, but like, new pants and new shirt every single day, especially if it's a non-critical, life-threatening time of year, which can happen in the whites anytime, but normally in the summer, it's not life-threatening. So clothing, I'd say really look at your clothing and watch out for redundancy. Bring some spares, but just keep in mind, like, as long as you have one spare, I mean, you can wash that in a stream and move on, or, you know, just be like me and wear the same clothes for a couple days. And cosmetics, or not cosmetics, well, my wife maybe brought cosmetics back then, but toiletries are a way that people really, I think, in the beginning overdo it. You'll bring like a whole roll of toilet paper instead of taking it off of the roll. Instead of a travel toothpaste, you might bring a whole toothpaste, different, like, I don't know, like shampoos and conditioners and stuff. You'd be surprised. I've seen some people bring some really big stuff, giant things of bug spray. You'll learn to kind of avoid some of that stuff. And some of it might be important to you, like I said, so you just got to learn it as you go. All right, any other chats over here? Howdy from Colorado. What's up, Callie? Kevin says, Kevin B, do you foresee doing any more winter trips where you bring your equipment on a sled? Yeah, I think so. Mike and I did a trip it was almost exactly a year ago when we brought a sled, and that was super fun. We put a giant like Tupperware container on a sled and went into the woods. I would totally do that again. Next time, I think I'm going to go even more hardcore. I was just talking to him about this the other day. I want to bring like just even more crazy stuff, because why not? You're hauling a sled a couple miles in the woods. But yes, I would love to do that. All right, another from the Katadyn Facebook post. Michael Alt says, have you ever gone winter camping and forgot to pack something and realized it out on the trail? How did you improvise the situation? I've definitely forgotten stuff a lot of times. Luckily, I think it's always been minor stuff for the most part. I can't think of any time specifically in winter that I forgot, maybe because I'm a little more scared of winter because of the potential for things going wrong. That being said, ironically, this doesn't maybe count, but I forgot my map on the trip I just did in New Hampshire. I realized when I got up there, luckily I realized the night before that I didn't bring my map. But that doesn't, I don't know if that counts, because I always check that before I hit the ground at the trailhead. And so I was aware of this. I had to go find a ski shop and buy a map, but that's not fun. I've definitely, and I forgot my pack cover on that trip, which in the snow isn't as bad as rain, but I figured it's no big deal. But then I got 12 inches of like hard, heavy snow, and it was like everywhere on my pack. How did I improvise out of that? No, I just kind of dealt with it. Just kept brushing my pack off. It was pretty silly, but not the end of the world. Although that pack cover thing does lead into forgetting something. There's been times I forgot my bear bag line, as well as like bear bag, like that whole system. That's not good, right? You don't want critters eating your food, even if it's not a bear. In my case, luckily, I usually bring a little bit of line, like rope, thin rope with me, just to have in my pack so that I can do extensions from my tarp lines. And I just use that as the rope. And then for the bag, this is something that works so well that now I just do it all the time. It saves me weight for ultralight backpacking. Speaking of that pack cover, just take your pack cover, right, which is what you put over the pack to keep it dry. Take that, put all your food in it, kind of like a hobo sack, wrap the line around it, tie it off, throw it over the limb, you know, how you normally would. You pull it up, you got yourself a waterproof, or at least a heavily water-resistant bear bag, essentially, and it's not costing you any extra weight because it's an item that you already brought. But other than that, and some other minor things, luckily I haven't forgotten anything too major. I'm still waiting, because I do mostly hammock camping, still waiting for that day when I forget a suspension strap. That would be really bad. That would be terrible. Anyway, all right, what else we got here? Now, aside from the winter backpacking disaster, have you ever had another trip where a situation forced you to abort? No. He's talking about the video when Sub-Zero camping goes wrong. The infamous event with Mike. If you haven't seen that, I won't spoil it for you. No, luckily not. I also won't spoil the trip that's coming up that I just did, but I will say there may have been a low morale point out there by myself where I at least fantasized about walking out of the woods and getting a burger in a hotel. I can at least tell you that I did not do that, but yeah, it's winter that's going to break you, I think, in rain, but no, thankfully never had to abort any trip other than that one that we talked about. All right. Dwayne Gaston, and he says, what's the story behind your name, Syntax 77? This may be a little bit of a letdown. It's not that cryptic or super exciting. Syntax is, I used to be, I still am, but particularly when I was younger, super into computers, just really nerding out. And yeah, me, imagine that. And so syntax, syntax, is just the computer term for language. That's all. So back on Xbox Live, like Xbox One, like way back in the day, uh, I wanted the name syntax, but I had to spell it a little differently, I guess just to be cool, and probably because somebody already took the word syntax. But somebody also took syntax, so lucky number 7. Throw that on there. Is that going to work? Yes, it did. They accepted it. So that's my Xbox name. And then when I went to YouTube in 2007, really dating myself here, somebody took syntax 7. I wonder what he's doing now. Should check up on him. So I took syntax 77. One short of a jackpot, but pretty lucky. So that's all there really is to it. There you go. That's a name. Okay. Yeah, another thing about the name. Yeah, people have thought that it meant like syntax, like I'm making some moral statement, or maybe I want some sort of new tax implemented. Nope, nope, nope. All right, Jim W. Jim Wofford, how do you prepare for unexpected winter weather change without overloading or going so light you become vulnerable? Well, the hard and painful truth, at least for me, is I'm going to go towards overload instead of going light. In the winter, I don't play around much. I mean, I have a video called Winter Ultralight Backpacking Gear List, but even that, I mean, and people give me flack for it a little bit, is not anywhere near ultralight. I would say it's weight conscious, but I don't mess around in the winter. You got to bring all your layers, all the stuff I just saw, I mean, that I just showed you. There's really no getting around that, at least for the temperatures I'm talking about for sub-zero. If it's 15, like I said, you can make the changes I showed, maybe omit the mittens. And then other than that, like you're going to have to bring a more established stove like this guy. So I like alcohol stoves, like do-it-yourself ones. That's really fun and geeky. But like I'm not messing with that for melting snow. And you'd have to bring like 14 gallons of denatured alcohol. So I'm going to bring something like this that's a little heavier, but I can do all kinds of cooking on that or melting snow. Shelter-wise, I'm not going to play around with that. I don't know. I mean, basically, I'd say don't get too caught up in being super light in the winter. Look out for redundancy and silly stuff like that, but I just err on the side of caution in the winter is what I do there. All right. Dwayne says, I knew it. Thanks. You're welcome, Dwayne. The name mystery is solved. Okay. What else do we want to talk about here? Do you bring any? I saw somebody ask. I'll find his name without slowing the whole program down. But he asked, do you change your meals that you bring when you go winter hiking? Higher caloric content density or something to that effect. Yeah, but it's nothing really too crazy. It's just I bring more food, almost like the equipment and clothing. I'm going to err on the side of having a little too much because being cold burns calories. It's just you're going to burn more calories when you're cold, especially if you're physically shaking. I mean, that's why you're doing that. That's why your body's making you do that. It's also going to help you sleep better and stay warmer at night. So I just bring a lot more food. If I end up packing some out, no big deal. Because the colder I am, which I can't predict necessarily, means the hungrier I'm going to get. Or at least I've learned I might not get hungry because I'm all jacked up and adrenalized from being out there doing stuff in the snow. So you got to force yourself to eat more the colder it is. So not really an amazing answer, I guess, but I just bring more of it out there. Matter of fact, speaking of Katadyn, once again, they sent me some food too, which was the first time I messed with that. Actually, they sent it with the water filter. I'm still snacking on it. The Grape Escape. They have a fun spicy mango trail mix that I like, and I've never tried their dinners until this trip. speaking of calories, in New Hampshire, I did their pad thai, which was a pretty heavy meal, which was great. I actually ate it for breakfast, which is a great example of winter, right? I'd wake up in the morning and be painfully cold when I got out of that hammock, especially, I mean, 6 a.m. is like the coldest, and I was getting up around time of day, and I was getting up around 7. So I would literally, I had a little path stamped out with my snowshoes, and eventually it was enough that I could take my snowshoes off, and I would just run this circuit, not run it, but like walk it fast every morning to get warmed up, and then eat a heavy meal. And I was actually eating Alpine Air pad thai noodles for breakfast, and I'll tell you, it works pretty well. So eat a lot of food, I guess, is what I'm saying. Any plans to do the West Rim Trail? I was just talking to my mom about the West Rim Trail today. She wants to do the West Rim Trail. Yeah, I have to look into it. I know PA is like so close to me, and I feel like I neglect it. But usually, like, I start thinking of going to PA, and then like I'm a little obsessive and crazy, and next thing I know, I just keep ratcheting it up until I'm like driving all the way to Maine or New Hampshire or something. But one of these days, lots of PA requests out there. All right, how long have I been gabbing here? Half hour. Wow. And we still got people hanging in there. Thanks, everybody. Now, let's see if there's any more comments that come through. Feel free to throw them out there. And I'm going to scan some of these Facebook posts. If there's any other things that anybody wants to know or talk about, and check out some other stuff to bring out. Do have some notes on here I wanted to talk about accessing like drinking water on the trail, especially since we're here on Katadyn site talking about water filters and stuff. But I think I kind of touched on that. Snow camping, right? My ideal thing is you can go deep into the woods where there's no stream and melt snow. But other than that, I always look at the map, and one of the first things I do on my map is look for stream crossings. And then you don't necessarily know how reliable that is. So then I'll go on the internet and start searching forums for trip reports, trail reports, how reliable is the water around here, how bad, how like murky is it, or is it a real nice stream, you know, stuff like that. So that's part of my planning process. And then ideally you'd like to camp by water, but it doesn't always happen, right? But if you can, it's great. If not, well, then you gotta just load up heavy. All right. Maybe do one more question and then wrap it up. I can't believe I went through 32 minutes already. Very cool. And we have to announce this winner. I know. Don't let me leave without announcing the winner. That would be that would be terrible. All right, let's do one more. And then we're good to go. I think I'm going to post this. I think there's a way for me to download this. Some people asked if they could see this. This isn't helping them because they're not watching now. They said they're working or whatnot and they want to see this. Let your friends know, if that's them, that you can come back. This is going to live on the Katadyn page permanently, as far as I know, so they can rewatch it here, or I'm going to see if I can also upload a copy on the my YouTube channel, Syntax77, or syntax77.com. Shameless plug. Oh, I know one that I wanted to answer. What's your favorite hiking book, says Stan W. Not Without Peril. I forget the author's name, but no surprise, it's about New Hampshire, but kind of morbid. It's about all of the tragic fatalities that have occurred in the White Mountains. It actually has everyone in there, some to more extent than others, but a lot of them, I mean, all the way back to like the 1800s and stuff. It's really kind of cool historically. So you get some hiking info, and then it works its way into the 90s and into today. So that would be my favorite hiking book. Ever backpacked and gotten sick while in a remote location? What did you do? How did you combat the illness? That's what Annie Duplice Crawford says. I don't think I've ever really gotten sick, but I've certainly busted myself up pretty good a few times. Especially the video with TJ and I, where what did I call that video? That time I hiked with a busted face. I think that's literally the title of the video. I fell on my face. I mean, that wasn't really sick, but that was probably the worst incident where I really busted my face open. And luckily TJ's a nurse, so I was able to entrust his advice that I should just take ibuprofen. We bandaged it up and I got through it, but my face swelled up and everything. That was probably the worst kind of not feeling well on the trail situation for me. That, and I fell in Maine and landed on my butt. Again, I was with my friends, two of which were nurses, so that made me feel better. But my glute swelled up to about the size of a basketball and turned black all the way down to the bottom of to my knee. Pretty bad. So those were bad, but how did I deal with it? You just keep hiking and moving. The funny thing is, with both those injuries, it wasn't until I got off the trail and back in town that I started actually noticing how much I hurt. Just because you're so focused on, like, I just got to get through this. It's amazing what the body can do. Oh, here's one. Have you ever used a bear-resistant food canister? If so, do you have any suggestions about which ones to use? This is from Madison Roach. Yes, I have. Mike and I used one in Colorado. It was a requirement. We had no choice. I've also used it in Adirondacks with my wife, where it was a requirement. At least we thought it was going to be a requirement. We ended up a little bit outside of those boundaries, but we still took it. The brand that we used, both Mike and I both have the same one. It's the Bear Vault BV, whichever one the big one is. I think it's BV 500. And it's about this big. Got to put it on the outside. You don't have to, but we put it on the outside. No, wait. I stuffed it in the bottom of my pack. All I know is it's not fun when you have to use a bear canister because they're super bulky. On the upside, all of your food is in one spot. So, like, there's none of that hunting through your bag looking for food at the end of the night. Like, it's all right there. You can also sit on it, which is nice. It's like having a stool. But that's the one I used, and I've been pretty happy with it. Relative to what it is, it's not that heavy. It's still a pound and a half or something. But I would check out that. There's a lot of different brands, but be careful where you're going, because some of the places that you go, I guess because people tried to, like, bring their own, like, DIY bear canisters, like pig cans and stuff. Wherever you're going, look at the actual regs. They may very well specifically tell you exactly which bear canister to use, which brands are approved. So look out for that, Madison. But they're not the end of the world. That was Cindy M that asked about the food selection. What's the cold? Rick V says, what's the coldest temperature you've ever slept outside in a hammock or a tent? Okay. Coldest I've ever slept in a tent, negative 25-ish, based on the weather reports, maybe negative 23, something like that. And that was on the ground in a tent. And the coldest for a hammock was probably the trip that I just did, which, like I said, is hard to tell. The local forecast, which was actually at a lower elevation to me, says it went down to negative 12. But then Mount Washington, which was above me, says it went down to negative 2. Like I said, I don't know. But below zero-ish. And that was, I was testing a 15-degree insulation system, which I purposely was like, yeah, I'm going to push this thing to its limits and take this 15-degree system out and use it, which sounds great and interesting until you're actually out there at like 15, 20 degrees below the rating on your bag. And then you're like, for the sake of science, doesn't sound so fun anymore. But yeah, that's the coldest I've done with those. Kevin Lawler says, have you ever been really scared or creeped out at night? The woods can be creepy from time to time. You know, surprisingly, for the most part, it's probably not because I'm like unscarable, but I just, if I'm solo hiking, I'm either exhausted from hiking all day because I'm by myself and I can just push it all day. So when I get to camp, I'm like no fire, just eat and pass out. So there's no time to be creeped out. Or in the winter, there's so many chores to do that my mind's off of it. That being said, yeah, there's been some times where you're sitting there, and it, you know, just on the New Hampshire trip that I just did, snow camping by myself, I was sitting there eating dinner, and I put on a podcast. I think it was Rogan and Diaz, and it was all well and good. And then, of course, they start talking about scary movies that freak them out. And I'm sitting in the middle of the woods. Moonrise wasn't until like 2 hours like away from where I was. It was pitch black, and they're talking about scary movies. I actually got a little weird for like half an hour there. So there you go. All right. Are you still on keto? And do you find your food lighter now with keto or heavier? Would you keep on keto in the White Mountains? Keto is like a high fat, low carb diet. Yeah, I am. I vary. The Pennsylvania trip I stayed on, and the New Hampshire trip I just did, because I had so many other things to worry about, I went off and I just did regular backpacking food. Yes, it's going to be heavier to do keto-friendly foods, because you're probably just, I mean, the backpacking foods are not really an option. Although, unless Alpine Air wants to start making some high-fat, low-carb alternatives, go for it. There's a niche market, because I can't find much. So you're going to be bringing real food if you're worried about low carbs. So I bring, like on the Pennsylvania trip, I brought real eggs in a Tupperware, hot dogs. You can bring an actual steak, but it's going to be real food. But on the upside, you're going to have to worry less about water, because you won't have to rehydrate your food. Someone just commenting on listening to creepy stuff in the woods. Yeah, it wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done. Okay, I think I've done a lot of these. And now all of a sudden I'm up at 41. So I think I was aiming at like 45 minutes as a max. So I think we'll get ready to wrap it up. I do believe. I know somebody did ask. I don't find his name either. Sorry, man, but I know somebody asked, have you ever used your hammock? Because I do mostly hammocks, but I do tents as well. Have you ever used your hammock quilt, which is basically a giant quilt, but it has a foot box at the end that goes around your feet, but no hood? Have I ever used that on the ground? Yeah, actually I have. The trip I was just talking about, the coldest trip I've ever done, where it was -25, was actually with a quilt on a sleeping pad. And top-wise, I was fine. The pad wasn't enough. That was my mistake. But I just wear a heavy wool hat and the quilt, and I use some shock cord to lace through the D-rings on the back to keep it together, kind of like a traditional sleeping bag. It's much lighter than a sleeping bag, and it was a 0-degree bag, and I pushed it well beyond its rating, and I did just fine. So that is possible. And then JD Riggs says, where's Carol? I don't know. I keep looking out these windows. I haven't seen her though. Speaking of being creeped out in the woods. And then the last thing, another one that I know I saw, I feel bad, but I don't want to bore everybody by sitting here looking for it. But somebody just did, for winter, do you prefer hammock or tent? And I'm going to say hammock is my go-to. Especially, I just did recently, within the last month or so, a video called Deep Winter Hammock Camping, where I show a system that I use for winter hammock camping. You can check that out. I won't get into it here, but that's my preferred system. It's my most comfortable system. I really enjoy it. I love it. But it's mostly on solo trips. Now, I've done winter trips with a hammock with my friend Mike, but for the most part, I'd say a lot of times, even though it's not as comfortable, I still like tent camping in the winter when I'm with another person. I don't think I'd ever do it solo because I'm so much more comfortable in the hammock and warmer, which surprises a lot of people. But it's kind of fun in a tent, especially like on the trip I just did. That would have been awesome. It got to a point with the 12 inches of snow all day that I was like, kind of over it. And I'm just hunched under my tarp, under my hammock. Situations like that are a reason that Mike and I bring a tent often, because if that happens, you and your friends, especially if you bring a nice sized tent, you just go hang out in the tent, chit chat, maybe have a couple fun beverages that you pulled in on a sled. So I like both. There's reasons for both. And there we go. I'm 1 minute away from 45 minutes, which is around my target. So, I saw something. I keep seeing stuff that I want to talk about, but then I'm going to wrap it up. Someone asked about a ground barrier. Kevin Dendy, do you recommend a ground barrier between the tent and the ground? Not in the winter. And I think they're overrated. What is it? I don't use one, so I haven't used one in so long I forgot what it's actually called. But the protector between the tent and the ground. You put the big ground cloth sheet out. In the winter, I'm camping on like 6 feet, 3 to 6 feet of snow as a snow bed that I've leveled and stomped out with my snowshoes. My tent's not going to get damaged by that. So I put my tent right down on it. That's what Mike and I do. Now, out in the desert Southwest, like there's no trees, so we had to do hammock. My wife and I, we did a couple trips out there. Definitely want to go with the ground cloth for that because you have your gravel and stuff like that, abrasive materials, and you'd rather mess up that ground sheet than you would the bottom of your tent. So there's reasons for it, but then I also think it gets a little over pushed, and it's a decent amount of weight that you can shed if you're going somewhere where you know you're going to be on nice cushy grass or snow. All right, cool. All righty, well, thank you everybody for joining me on this one. Thank you to Katadyn for setting this up. I think it was really fun. I've never done a Facebook Live before. I was a little nervous that I was going to pull it off, but it looks like it happened because we're all here and we had a good conversation. So thank you for that. I'm looking forward to putting this video out. Like I said, don't be confused. The Pennsylvania winter video, which is a monster of a video. I spend a lot of time going over clothing and cooking and all kinds of stuff. It's an hour and 20 minutes. I know. You can break it up and watch it in chunks. That's the beauty of YouTube. But if people often, or some people ask, I want videos where you spend more time at camp. Careful what you ask for. Because this one's an hour and 20 minutes as of right now. I just got to finish the intro. I'm going to put that up, but that's not the video I've been referencing in this whole live event. That one will be up in a couple weeks, so keep an eye out for that, and I'll catch up with everybody later. All right? All right. Thanks for the feed, and you have fun out there. Dwayne, you just flipped the script. You just did my outro on me, so yeah, that's that. I don't know. How do you appropriately end these things? Is it polite? I just hit end broadcast and I disappear? It seems so sudden. I guess I'll just do my tagline. That'll make me comfortable. So till next time, I'm Syntax77, and you have fun out there. I knew I was going to do that. I hope people are still here. I'm going to give everybody a couple seconds to come back. The last thing I saw when this live feed went down, I feel terrible. I'm supposed to be a professional. Was somebody go, the giveaway? I didn't say the giveaway. So let's give a minute for everybody to come back, and I'm going to let you know who won. I feel terrible right now. But let's give it 1 minute. So here's what I'm going to do. I have the winner. It's actually taped to the corner of my monitor so I would not forget. And I have the name, and I'm going to give it away in 1 minute. I will find one quick question to answer to stall so that we can get a couple people in here, and then I'm going to give it out. Also keep in mind that you don't have to do anything. Speaking to the winner that I'm about to announce, Katadyn is going to reach out to you directly and hook you up with your free, get it, free Be Free filter. So this will be on the way to you shortly. And how do you choose a camp location during unpredictable winter weather? What do you look for in a prime spot? From Johnny Lopez. Here's our last question, and then the winter, or the winner, I promise. How do I choose a camp location in winter is actually easier than in summer because you have a bunch of snow on the ground, at least for what I consider deep winter backpacking. So on the trip that I just took, that I keep talking about in New Hampshire, there was 3 to 6 feet of snow on the ground. That smooths out a bunch of areas that normally, especially in New Hampshire, you couldn't camp on at all. And there's snow everywhere. So I don't look for much other than a wide open area, maybe a break in the trees so I can see some stars at night. And I can use a shovel and snowshoes to flatten out just about anything. And I can melt all the snow around me. So that's what I look for in winter camping. And here we go, right now. The winner of the Be Free filter system is Amy Snook. And Amy, you have won, and I apologize for the suspense that I put everyone through. I apologize to Katadyn because now there's 2 live feeds. Sorry, you know, it's kind of weird. But that's the winner. So Amy Snook, sit tight, don't worry. Katadyn's going to reach out to you. You won the Be Free system. Like I said, it's my favorite filter. You're gonna love it. I promise. All right. Till next time, I'm Syntax77, and you have fun out there.